summer kisses, sunburned hands I used to hold since you went away. The days grow long and I still hear all the winter song, but I miss you most of all, my darling.
Attention please, and we just all come a little bit closer. The water is warm. Guys, welcome to the Richard Harris International Film Festival and its segment on culture. We also have, which is important to me, is a small snippet on suicide awareness. And it does hit each and every one of us at some point, you know, or hopefully it doesn't, but somewhere along the line you're going to come across it. So I think it's important to get the message out there as well. And one thing that was significant for me in the last couple of weeks was, I think 4 weeks ago, 4 young girls entered the River Shannon here, and only one of them came out. And it was a significant thing for me about what can we give to these kids to make them happier or have something to look forward to. So we create events. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Tom Muldowney, but before that, I'd like to introduce you to the Limerick Marine Search and Rescue guys to say a few words about what they do in this city. So, Terry, if I could have you. You're very welcome, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, and fellow comrades, that's not to suggest that my fellow comrades are not gentlemen, but we're in the business of recovery on the river now for the last 33 years. And we hope to keep the show going for another good few years yet to come. To keep us on the road, we need people like Aoife and her companions that do fundraisers for us here and there, and anybody that comes along, every little donation that's given is a help. And that's what keeps the show on the road. And it's, what can I say, it's not probably the nicest business in the world to be in, but it's badly wanted in the city. We started off 33 years back when a young lad got drowned, and a few of the lads who were sub-aqua divers at the time got together and decided between them that a search team was badly wanted in Limerick, as there was nothing like it heretofore. So they got the show on the road, and thanks be to God, it's been an excellent success, and we've kept our head over water up till now anyway. So what more can I say? What we normally do is we're tasked by the Coast Guard if there's any incident on the river, at the same time as the fire brigade and the Gardaí, and it gives the person that goes in a better chance, the more people that are involved in trying to do a recovery. So what more can I say? That's about it. Bones of it. There's no need to go into the nitty-gritty side of it. You all know what's involved, and hopefully we'll keep our show on the road for the next good few years to come.
Yes.
Just to reiterate what Terry said there is a donation bucket here and anything is welcome. So thank you for that. So to kick on with proceedings today, as I said, this is part of our culture at Flannery's, we'll call it. I'm going to hand you over to the Limerick Writers Centre confidant, Mr. Tom Muldowney, who's going to explain how proceedings are going to go on over the next couple of hours. I'm also delighted that my Aunt Alice is here and my Uncle Brendan and Timothy are here to say a couple of words, Nicholas is here to say, to recite some poetry from my cousin, Timothy. So handing you over to Tom Muldowney. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zeb. And now it's my onerous duty to officially say the Richard Harris International Film Festival, in association with Limerick Writers Centre and Bear Spot 2019, present Culture at 1314 Flannery's. Now, it would be invidious of me to follow the excellent words of Zeb and Terry, and more about that anon. We have a lot of events on in this slot, and first of all, we have Kevin Higgins, a Galway poet. We have an audio-visual presentation from Kevin O'Connor, and which was compiled by Kevin O'Connor and Mike Finn, titled Two Actors, One City. And it compares and contrasts two Limerick men, two actors, Richard Harris and Jim Hayes. And we'll come to that subsequently. Jim Hayes, of course, and it's a very good reason to buy his book, his memoir, titled Shouting in the Evenings. And as you, unfortunates who have strutted your time upon the stage, well know, an actor does that. He shouts in the evenings or any other time of the day, provided that Foley material is readily available. Well, moving on swiftly from the tribulations of dealing with recalcitrant agents and managements, we also have Kevin Higgins, who has been described as Ireland's most political poet. He's keeping a poetic drum beating loudly in Galway, and he'll be on. Punctuating the poetic endeavour and the audiovisual, we have Eve's Record Box, a jazz trio, and they're from Limerick, comprising electric guitar, double bass, and a singer. This scintillating trio has a rich pedigree featuring the vibrant singing of Jane Fraser, backed up by the sophisticated sound of Paddy Shannon on guitar and Rory Murphy on double bass. Ladies and gentlemen, Eve's Record Box.
They say he wandered very far, very far.
you very much, Eve's record box. Kevin Higgins, whose best-selling first collection, The Boy With No Face, published by Salmon Poetry, was shortlisted for the 2006 Strong Award for Best First Collection by an Irish Poet. Kevin's second collection of poems, Time, Gentlemen, Please, was published in 2008 by Salmon Collection, Frightening New Furniture. It was published in 2010 by Salmon. And his work also appears in the generation-defining anthology, Identity Parade, New British and Irish Poets. A collection of Kevin's essays and book reviews mentioning the war was published in 2012 by Salmon Poetry. His new and selected poems was published in 2017, and his most recent collection, Sex and Death at Maryland Park Hospital, was published by Salmon this June. His work has been broadcast on RTE Radio, Limerick FM, and BBC Radio 4. Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Higgins.
I would far rather have continued listening to the music, I must say. And I'm sure many of you feel the same. But what I'll do is, the thing is, when a new book comes out, you do a lot of readings and you read the same poems over again. So I'm going to start reading a few new poems, including one that was written about someone who annoyed me last week. I wrote it in March, they annoyed me before. And it's called The Goddess of Gossip. And it's after Bertolt Brecht. Bertolt Brecht had a poem called The God of War. And the God of War always came and said that he would take up very little of your time. The Goddess of Gossip is similar. She flew in and perched next to me in the coffee shop today, flashed me some paper she said gave her legal right to take possession of my head. She breathed all over me and I inhaled all the cigarettes she's lit up and will continue to devour long after I'm dead. Introduced me to her sidekick who materialized beside her, a bald dwarf who talked but said nothing and wouldn't stop smiling. In her disintegrating voice, she croaked how she was on my side and my wife's side too, then asked me the color of my underpants. I joked I wasn't wearing any. Her sidekick muttered, neither was he, scribbled something in his tiny pink notebook. And the chimney of her mouth continued to blow, how she's a great champion of me, my wife, and all belonging to me. That's why she keeps a close, if slightly wonky, eye on my enemies, and my wife's enemies, and my late mother's enemies, who one of my neighbours had told her all about. As a professional lady might reveal her left tit to an auctioneer in town for the Galway races, in the hope he'll pay for a look at the other one. She threw morsels of truth on the table between us, and when I ate none of them, sidekick scratched another note in his little pink book and chuckled to himself. Barely audible now, her good eye superglued to the door as if it was expecting someone important. She leaned in and reassured me, her presence in my life, and in my wife's life, and in the lives of all belonging to me, would be short-lived and entirely benign. Okay. I was challenged in a workshop to write an erotic poem. And I decided the only way a man nowadays could write an erotic poem is if the man fails to achieve the object of his, whatever it is. For eros and elegy, there are certainly obscene things in this poem. Her hands are a safety harness that will not hold you. The hair on her head is a field that returned to the wild despite complaints and solicitors' letters from neighbours. Her droopy right eyelid is the shutter on a sex shop, eager to close for the evening. Her chest is the hills of Clare, inviting you across the bay, though you can't swim, and the last boat has left for the season. Her neck, lips, and ears are the menu of starters in a restaurant so fabulous the security guards are paid a bonus to eject the likes of you. Her spine is a repossessed grand piano used to play to yourself in your sleep. Her pubic hair is a lawn you'll never get to walk across or break into a sweat mowing. Her bumhole is a sweet factory you'll never be allowed to visit, and the cheeks either side of it smoother than the nectarines you remember from July. Her thighs are piping hot turkey on the table for Christmas, though with a far better personality than your average turkey. And between them, all the oranges stomach acid no longer allows you to eat. That's that. I brought the poem back. It was a workshop I was giving at Galway Arts Centre, so I rose to their challenge and then said, but I'm not reading you this poem in the workshop. We'll go for tea, and when the workshop is finished, so no one can complain. So they didn't. This is a political poem, and it was commissioned by, for a BBC Radio 4 programme, a tribute to Jonathan Swift, which was broadcast last week. And Swift's modest proposal, in which he mocked and satirized well-off gentlemen. They were all well-off, and they were pretty much all gentlemen, who in the 18th century there was a great fashion for writing pamphlets coming up with earnest solutions to the problem of poverty, or pevity as Michael D would call it, in the rural areas in Ireland. What are we going to do about them with our large families, all of this sort of thing. And of course Swift proposed that, well, the obvious solution is fatten the babies and feed them to the rich. I think why I am a writer more than any other reason is because Peter O'Toole read that piece at the Gaiety Theatre when it was reopening in 1984, having been done up, and he didn't say what it was. So they thought he was really proposing that children be fattened and eaten. About a third of the audience left, and RT's switchboard was jammed with complaints. We were challenged with the task of writing our own modest proposal about some contemporary issue. And I took housing. And this, I can't do the full Uber Dublin 4 of Owen Murphy, who was the Minister for Housing, but if you can imagine that in it, the Dort, with a Clongowes wood added on. I took aim at the way that instead of doing simple things like building a lot of council houses, it's incentives to private individuals to do this and that they come up with. What the Minister for Housing proposes, thinking outside the council house. Easy for the opposition to hang around overheated TV studios, spouting impossible promises, which at this stage sound like a recorded message from Santa Claus. But out there in what I like to call the world, a constituent of mine and his wheelchair recently spent the coldest night of the year in a discontinued telephone box. And worse than that, there are people who have nothing better to do than use this situation as an excuse to be atrocious to government ministers on Twitter. If we as a country, who relatively speaking, lived mainly in tumbled-in cottages and could barely afford trousers until around about last Friday, or to get past this glitch, we need to start thinking outside the traditional council house, which, like communism, selling encyclopedias door to door and national health glasses, isn't coming back. First thing tomorrow, immediately after my Eggs Benedict, I will introduce tax breaks, incentivizing those that have them to rent out every available wardrobe and wheelie bin to those who through some bad life decision have found themselves caught between tiny 1,000 quid a month flats. Given the lack of such facilities in your average wheelie bin or wardrobe, every qualifying adult will be issued with a potty, which may be emptied anywhere except over the Minister for Housing's head. And under subsection 7 of my Housing Emergency Provisions Act, infants inconsiderate enough to have been born without fixed abode will be confined to newly tax-deductible sideboard drawers, so they won't grow up to take more space than the world has for them. Okay. This is another poem I've never read before, and then I'll read some from the book. This is called Dishonest Doris. It's not about Boris Johnson, who I insist on calling Doris. I think it suits him better. One group of people, I write satires on political things, but I also write satires about people. And I'm always fascinated by people who always blame all of their problems on other people, particularly but when they use social media. And it's nearly kind of, it's almost like it's a cross between the Agony Ants column in the Sunday World back in the day, or pornography. You almost can't look away at what disaster have they come up with now. And this is about one of those people. Dishonest Doris. You apportion blame for your life like a nun spreading strawberry jam in wartime, taking care never to get any on yourself. Deep in your cranium, a gramophone record spins the case for your own acquittal, that it's not your fault, your psychotherapist no longer returns your calls, or that his predecessor resigned and leapt cackling into the deadliest bit of the river. In the matter of all the potential ex-husbands who joined silent monastic orders under false names, or paid vast sums to have themselves neutered by some backstreet carving knife, in each and every distance the verdict, them, not you. As for the kittens you kept adopting, every one of them which absconds first time you let it out for a run, unfriends you on Facebook, and makes straight for the motorway where it pleads with heavy goods vehicles to squish it. Your Supreme Court of One puts on its big dusty wig and pronounces everyone guilty but you, ungrateful kittens included. Okay, now the title of the book is called Sex and Death in Merlin Park Hospital. I've had various people say, well, I understand the death bit, but I don't get the other bit. And this is where the poem, the title came from. I have a chronic lung condition, and I go out to Merlin Park now and get wired up plugged into the mains, I think of it as. And they put a bag of stuff into me every 8 weeks. And that's been a long process leading up to that. And this is called Sex and Death at Merlin Park Infusion Unit. Blood pressure okay, temperature taken by a bit of plastic she stuck in my ear. The nurse straps a bag of magic to my still relatively obliging vein. Around me a room littered with the even worse, the mold of the grave already about their faces. Any month now they'll be served to the maggot-nurturing earth. The look of them makes me want to throw my arms while they still have flesh around every cubic centimetre of my wife. The nurse, with her firm fingers and soft eyes, her more sombre colleague who asked me just then how my waterworks had been. Even the bus driver who brought me here, and my next-door neighbour who was putting out his bins as I was leaving to make wild and inappropriate love to the whole world. Okay, and this next poem was originally titled, in first draft, How to Deal with Inappropriate Crushes. But Susan, who I'm married to, who is always the first reader and editor of my poems, said, you know, you better watch that because people might think it was true. There is that. So why don't we give it a more classical title? So now it is advice to a modern Odysseus. Odysseus had the worst midlife crisis in the history of Western literature. He had to tie himself to a ship and all of this sort of stuff. So here we are. Spend hours convincing yourself the object of your lust is the sort who takes milk in her bovril and probably eats cold Brussels sprouts by the basin load, who even if she did, you know it wouldn't matter in the least. When you think of texting her, employ local youths to tie you to the nearest available electric fence and leave you there. When you eventually wriggle free and still can't stop picturing her, pay your neighbours the entire street in advance to arrange an orchestra of chainsaws to block out any possibility of her. And when even this fails to kill your want, ask a kindly nun to drive a forklift truck angrily over first your left, then your right foot. When you come round in hospital, still muttering her name, become a small-time religious fanatic and spend your evenings wisely going door to door flogging your own personal Jesus or Satan. Behind the wife's back, smuggle yourself in a taxi to the vet, bring the cat along for moral support, and beg him to apply his trusty wire cutter to your troublesome bit. And when he refuses, publicly volunteer to unblock free of charge other people's sewers any time of the day or night to remind your nostrils what everything in the end turns into. This poem was actually written while sitting on the sofa giving out about what was on the television on Friday evening. It is inspired by or modelled on Edwin Morgan, the Scottish poet, had a poem called My View of Things, and he would have a positive yes and a no, kind of in alternating lines. I managed to turn even the yeses into negatives. My view of things. What I love about lateness is the hope I might get to slip off home before you turn up. What I hate about punctuality is always getting there in time to chat before you leave. What I love about angle closure glaucoma is not seeing you when you're standing right in front of me. What I hate about comebacks is the possibility you'll have one. What I love about impotence is the sight of you jiggling your bits at me in the hope I might review your book, pretend to like your poetry, remember your name, and it having no effect whatsoever. What I love about my chronic lung condition is the hours of enforced sleep during which I can dream of a world in which I've never heard of you. What I love about going slowly deaf is not being able to hear the television. What I love about nuclear holocaust is the TV studio in which those three men are agreeing with each other will no longer exist. What I love about Crohn's disease is the hours I spend on the toilet during which I miss comedy panel shows in which Alan Davis talks to Alan Davis about Alan Davis. What I love about...
Straight from the dark side, that was Kevin Higgins. Think on these things, folks. Before the next presentation, I'd like to point out, for those of you who are intrigued by Kevin Higgins' work, well, you can read more. It's available in the capable hands of Marion at the Small Bar. Kevin Higgins' poetry books. Also available, or should be soon, Jim Hayes's intriguingly titled memoir, Shouting in the Evenings. If the sound goes, that's where I'll be at, be God. Now listen, that's it. Jim will kindly then, having you, dear punter, having purchased the said volume, he will add his John Doe to it. He's Jim Hayes, but John Doe can do his own signing. Right, ladies and gentlemen, a brief word about the actual presentation. Oh, thank you. Hang on a minute. Nobody supplied me with a luminous script. We'll do our best. There you have it. Is there a Maria Martin in the barn here? Hang on. I'd leave it. Jeez, yeah. Yes. Kevin O'Connor of this parish and Mike Finn have compiled an audio-visual presentation having a quick glance at two Limerick-born actors, to wit, James Hayes and Richard Harris. Unfortunately, Richard wasn't available, but Mr. Hayes is very much available. And we would have liked to have had the show in Ballinanty, but loyal to the last, he's coming into town here, even now. Anyway, it's a little word about the compilers. Mike Finn, a man of few words, Mike and Finn. I'm waiting for the candles to be lit. He, a writer, actor and director, co-authored the visual presentation with Kevin O'Connor. Now, Kevin O'Connor has a long biographical note here, but he also compiled a lot of radio, television documentaries, has written some books, and he's still hale and hearty. Thank you very much. Now, why waste the work of a great scriptwriter? As a radio producer, Kevin O'Connor made hundreds of features and dozens of documentaries, notably A Death in January 1982 about the maverick Sean Burke, who engineered the prison escape in London of the KGB spy George Blake, and the Limerick Soviet about a then relatively unknown episode during the War of Independence. Among his books are Ironing the Land, Railways, and Thou Shalt Not Kill, Crime, Irish Crime. Without further ado, folks, we'll go into two actors, one city. Take it away.
Richard Harris and James Hayes, two actors, one city. A port city with its muscular Shannon flowing through, affecting the unconscious, suggesting going somewhere else. During the 1940s and 1950s, that somewhere else was most likely experienced through the cinema. The city was a place of proliferating escapism through cinemas. Attendances were huge, and the cinemas were named after places to tempt the exotic climate of the imagination, a theatre of the mind whose earliest stimulus were the churches, also prolific, with their rich ritual of ceremony and sermonizing. Richard Harris, born 1930 into a well-off family whose home was among the merchant classes. And, about 10 years later, James Hayes grew up in Parnell Street, then a shabby street of small shops. Escapism was the order of the day for both as they went on to excel as actors, strutting their stuff in the capitals of world theatre. And their formative influences were here, basic though different schooling. Harris at fee-paying Crescent College, in which rugby was a school game. Hayes at CBS Sexton Street, which looked after the general population, and on the sporting side, hurling and Gaelic football were the school games, and rugby was regarded as an elitist, foreign game, even though it was played widely in the city. Both adolescents were also nurtured by a rich local arts and theatre scene. The college players in a tiny laneway theatre which managed to present Irish and international plays with a potent mix of amateur and professional skills. And then the Sicilians Musical Society, which staged versions of West End and Broadway musicals. Harris, born 10 years before Hayes, learned early to play the local media. As one headline said, Harris outstanding as Old Crescent advance, because sport was big in the city. And then, in a feature page, meeting TV actress Rita Gann, emboldened by sporting fame, Harris introduced himself, asked for her autograph, and then speedily told the Limerick leader, who promptly dispatched a photographer. And so Harris in his 20s soaked up and grew tall on media coverage. It would become an addiction. Meanwhile, Hayes, whose father, a bus driver, transferred to Mitchelstown on the Cork border, had a rural upbringing for a while. And then, when his father became ill, the family moved back to Limerick, and in that time of meagre social welfare, settled in Ballinanty, a local authority housing on the outskirts of the city, a mile or so from the Harris home in the Ennis Road. Hayes, nurturing artistic expression, joined the local amateur theatre movement while working in Limerick Clothing Factory, then an important employer. And in time, his acting abilities earned praise from Hilton Edwards, then a producer with the Gate Theatre, which Edwards had founded with Micheál Mac Liammóir, an actor who cast an aura over the profession. Of course, both Hayes and Harris had joint exposure, along with millions of others, to that culture changer of post-war Europe, the cinema. Paul Newman, Sophia Loren, Doris Day, Lee J. Cobb, Marlon Brando, Laurence Olivier. Olivier in particular stuck with the adolescent Hayes. He saw Richard III many times at the Carlton Cinema, revelling in the actor's own revelling in that part. But where could either of these two aspirants go to follow their ambition? London, capital city of our nearest neighbour, offered professional training. Harris failed to get into RADA, the leading academy, and settled for Lambda, afterwards funding at his family's expense a production in a small theatre which he directed. It failed commercially. He would later say he was so broke he slept in a coal cellar for 6 weeks, which is the kind of claim he was given to and, in retrospect, is subject to dramatic license. If so, the family rescued him sufficiently for him to get back on his feet and audition, the necessary bane of an actor's life. Other than athletes and politicians, what other job requires regular public audition and approval? So Harris went back to hoofing up and down the rickety Soho stairs of theatrical agents, and then went off to repertory in the sticks, as they called it, and eventually, back in London, landed with Joan Littlewood's radical theatre workshop in the East End, which was the opposite of the West End. Here he honed and established his skills as a professional actor. A transfer to the West End of Behan's play, The Queer Fellow, gave him exposure to agents and casting directors, which in turn led to a breakthrough part as a film actor, as an IRA gunman in Shake Hands with the Devil, a Hollywood tale of the War of Independence with the real Irish-American star James Cagney. These roles enhanced his taste for the limelight and media coverage. And the rest, as they say, is history, which saw him rapidly playing leads in theatre and film, notably The Long and the Short and the Tall, and then the film Mutiny on the Bounty, as third lead to Trevor Howard and Marlon Brando, whom Harris had imitated at the Savoy Cinema in Limerick as an adolescent cavorting in the aisles for the amusement of friends. And then, meeting Brando on set, Harris was defensive and aggressive. He let the media know of his arrived status by generating friction between himself and one of the great icons of cinema. Around this time too, Jim Hayes was making his way, albeit with less spectacle. Full employment during London's swinging 60s allowed him a series of low-paid jobs from which he managed to save for the fees for drama school. He got admission via audition to the Guildhall School of Music and Acting, and as said, he funded his studies with 2 evening night jobs: bottle washer in a hotel and factory security man. All his free time was spent in theatres, which in the 60s London had many. and then a stroke of luck brought him to the attention of director Lindsay Anderson, who had directed Harris in This Sporting Life, a film about rugby. Auditioning for a crowd filler part and being asked about his accent, Hayes said, "Limerick, where Richard Harris comes from." As extra, the money was crucial in subsidising his drama studies. And while he loved the tuition and the exercises on motivation, movement, building character, the juggling of many jobs, sleep deprivation, took a toll on his health. He became malnourished and run down, and he was wavering on leaving drama school. And then he was rescued by a fellow student and a teacher, Jackie Brandon. Between them, they engineered a scholarship which paid his fees for his final term at Guildhall. As he said, "After that, I sailed forward." In the acting profession then, the years after drama school were spent in provincial rep, where plays ran for a week or a fortnight, and that required an actor memorising a new narrative for the week ahead while playing that evening in the current drama production. It was demanding work in a chosen way of life whose very rigour would impart lifetime skills. And along the way, Hayes, the immigrant from Limerick, Ireland, as a jobbing actor, got to know the far-flung towns and cities of industrial Britain. It was a formation he would draw on as he ascended the profession. Becoming a regular, reliable actor at the Old Vic, the National Theatre, the RSC, where he glowed in character roles, directed by some of the trailblazing producers and directors of the day. John Dexter, Peter Hall, Michael Bogdanov. Then touring with the English Shakespeare Company to Africa and Asia, with productions radically adapted to reflect those audiences' political experience, which was usually one of colonialism, and its aftermath, which wasn't always pleasant. Shakespeare, living in an England of imperial expansion, could be tweaked in the text to reflect those on the receiving end of colonialism. A staple of major productions of classical restoration modern plays, Hayes has had a 30-year run of choice parts. Galileo, Romans in Britain, Amadeus, View from the Bridge, all requiring expertise in character, accent, and presence. And then confronting the challenge of a one-man show with memories of Mochlearmore in Limerick, he wrote and performed A Horde of Unemployed Ventriloquists, which was inspired by immersing himself in the absurdist writings of the Irish Times columnist Miles Nagopoli. And this solo achievement played in London's National Theatre. While that was playing, he saw Richard Harris outside the actor's then home, that is Harris's then home, which was the Savoy Hotel in London. Hayes dashed across the road and gave him a promotional flyer for his own one-man show, but now he doubts that the actor ever attended. Had Harris been in the audience, Hayes would have known about it. So by the turn of 2002, Hayes had played in 50 productions of Britain's National Theatre, clearly a leading actor in venues where the stars of the day came, worked hard, were acclaimed and went. In contrast, Hayes stayed on as Mr. Reliable, constantly cast and pushed into new roles by another generation of directors. He made friends with some of the great talents. Hayes as Julius Caesar, with Michael Gambon and Donald Sutherland. And during all this adventure, was married, has 2 children and 2 grandchildren. Richard Harris, James Hayes, 2 actors, 1 city. Okay, folks, that's it. Jim Hayes is here. He'll come up for a chat. Shouting in the evening, he can explain where that came from. So if any of you have questions, you can shout them up I'll shout a question at him, he'll shout an answer at me. That's what actors do.
Hello, thank you very much. Very touching to see your past presented like that. I grew up, born in Limerick, moved to Mitchelstown, came back to Limerick when I was about 9, and lived out there in Ballylanty, past Harris's house virtually every day, cycling up to the Christian Brothers and back in lunchtime, rain, hail, snow. So when I decided to become an actor, having done a lot of amateur shows here and set up companies, and we did really good work. And there were, I don't know if it still goes on, drama festivals, amateur drama festivals.
There are, yes, at Lone every year. Yeah.
Yeah, so we would go out to Killaloo and various places, and if you won the festival, you'd be invited to the All Ireland Festival in Athlone. I don't know if that still goes on.
Yes, true.
There was all very small spaces, but wonderful. And then you know, there's always these big actors came down from London and adjudicated, people like Hilton Edwards and Hugh McMaster, very great actor. Harold Pinter wrote a wonderful short piece about him. And usual thing, someone says you should become a professional. So in my ignorance and ambition, I suppose as well, I decided to go to London. I didn't know anybody over there. I knew nothing about drama school. I'd seen 2 professional productions in Dublin. I don't think there was much in the way of training. Maybe that's why I went to England. It's so long ago now. I'm 78 now. And so I went over and did lots of odd jobs I had to pay my way through drama school. I was always just a month,
Behind.
a term. I'd give them money for a term, and then I had no more money. So I would go and work as a security guard for a company called Securico. I'd go all over cities and London and guard, and they'd give me a uniform and a truncheon, which I left at home, propping the window open. And I would stay through the night, and they give you a kind of clock and a belt around your neck, and you'd go around the building. At certain points, you had to turn a key, and then it might be an office building, it might be a railway siding, it could be anything. But you'd learn tricks like to take the keys off the wall the first time round, and you could sit in a warmer space. Of course, if you did, you had to phone in as well. They're always checking that you were doing your job. So if you didn't, they'd phone you up, accuse you of falling asleep and all that. And then when you finished the job, of course, you could be anywhere in Greater London, which I didn't know, and then you had to find your own way home. I did a 24-hour shift once on Christmas Day, I remember that. There were terrible jobs. On a warehouse I went to, there was all newspapers in Battersea by the river. Stacks of them. And I'd be going around in the middle of the night, half asleep, and feral cats jumping out. In another one, there was a railway siding, and they said, be sure you wear your cap tonight, because you didn't always wear. And when I got there, it was like a scene from Stalag 17, the old Billy Wilder film. I got to the gate, and this man who I was taking over from came down with this huge Alsatian dog on a lead, who leapt up onto the gate, but I was a cab, he understood, and he went off and left me for the night. I was going around these old carriages through the night, making sure anything could go wrong with this dog. I also worked at the, sorry, I'm not talking much about the theatre here. I worked at the Lyceum.
It's in the book.
Yeah, it's in the book. The Lyceum Theatre, which now has had a long-running show there called The Lion King for many years. But when I first went to London and paid my way, I worked there for a woman called Mrs. Kelly, very nice woman. And she had me washing dishes, and it'd been turned into a ballroom. People came and danced, and in the balcony, they'd go up there and have drinks. And then there was an event which is now much frowned on called the Miss World contest. And I was sent backstage with trays of orange juice for these girls, you know, gorgeous creatures. And another thing I remember from that time, leaving the Lyceum very early the morning and going out, and the papers were being delivered, and the headline was, it was the Kennedy assassination. People often say, where were you when it happened? That's where I was, walking down the Strand with my shoes in my hand and my feet were so sore. So I got through drama school, and then I went to off into repertory. I went to Barrow in Furness, which I look back and say was the best decision I ever made in my life theatrically, because it's up there where they made nuclear submarines, way up in the northwest of England. The journey was terrible. And I had a girlfriend, and when she came up to visit me, to stay with me, I had to go down to the local Woolworths and buy a 2 and 6penny wedding ring, because you couldn't have someone staying the ring. So I did a play there every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks. It was incredible. You'd get up in the morning, you'd go into rehearse. You had to find time to learn the parts as well. And then in the evening, you'd do a different play, and you'd help out making the sets as well. And then I went...
Well, there's very little I can do now to promote the book, Shouting in the Evenings. Copies are available, and the author, as you know by now, is well available.
Then I'll tell you the story. People used to say, what's the story? Why is it called Shouting in the Evening? I worked with an actor, and his father would have been one of the first actors to play Doctor Who. His name was David Troughton. No, the actor was David. His father was, God, I've forgotten it. Troughton.
William Troughton was the first Who.
He was, no, William Hartnell was the first Doctor Who. And Troughton, I forgot his first name. Anyway, he was at a party, and with a lot of very kind of upper middle class people. And all very talking. And they said to him, oh, hello, and what do you do? He said, what do you do for a living? He said, I shout in the theatre, man. You know? He said, I shout in the evenings. That was it. We're always raising, I never need a mic. And I played Epidavros in Greece in front of 10,000 people. And we never had a mic. Sorry.
Well, I won't mention names, but James's anecdote reminds me of a book launch I attended, where the personage who was going to launch the book managed to get the title wrong 3 times. The fellow sitting beside me said, Jesus, I'm reading the wrong book. I'm moving swiftly on. A little bit of a hiatus here. The serious business of the evening is a tribute to the late Timothy Moore. Some of the family, Timothy's family, are here at hand to talk about him, and we'll follow that with the movie EVELYN, which deals with the subject of schizophrenia. So without further ado, Zeb Moore is somewhere here. He'll introduce the family.
No, the mic's not thing. No, it's okay. You can hear me all right? Yeah. There's not many people here. I think, you've been told now that we've lost a member of our family to suicide. It was 3 years ago, and we've come for this special event and a showing of the film EVELYN, which deals with the same topic. EVELYN, in this case, also a young man from South London, like Timothy. We want to thank Zeb for putting this on, and you'll understand the link now with Marine Rescue, because so many youngsters here have been losing their lives in the river by their own choice. Our son Tim, it does feel rather odd reading out some of his writing after published poets and raconteurs. He was a young man, he died at 26, nothing was published, but he wrote a great deal, and he was a gifted writer. He called himself many things. His full name's Timothy Stephen Onion Moore, Moore as in Zeb's cousin, Nick's brother, Brendan's son. He also called himself Timoclon and Methuseleth, and these strange names were god names. He was writing a book called The Bible, which all his friends wanted to be in, and in fact there was, people were very put out if they weren't in this Bible. And I'll just tell you one other little anecdote about him, just to give you an idea of the sort of character that he was. At the end of sixth form, they were in a mixed school, him and his friends. At the end of sixth form, the lads were rating the girls out of 10. So they're passing around this little bit of paper with a list of the girls' names on, and the lads are all writing, 4, 8, 9 or whatever. This bit of paper gets to Tim, and he goes, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, down the whole list. And of course, when everyone sees that, the girls think, what a cool guy Tim is. And the lads think, aren't we schmucks? So he was a person who was not afraid to be different, but he did hide his light under a bushel. He never put anything forward to be published. After he died, a group of his friends got together, went through some of his writing, and got this little booklet together for the funeral. And then a year later, they got some more of his work and did another little booklet. Now those booklets are over there, there's just a few of them, and you take one when you give your donation to the Marine Search and Rescue. We're only going to read 3 little pieces, so we're not going to be here long, and then you get to watch the film EVELYN. I'm going to read 2, and then Tim's father's going to read a 3rd one. So this first one, I would say nothing of Tim's was ever dated, and nothing of it ever had a title, and it may be poetry, it may be prose. So the first tiny short piece. Through dark riddles and rhyming light refracted, we follow from the first 3, this, now. We combat and begin to draw blood from stones and sticks, past the halfway mark, but my colours are fading, see? A faded play, the mark of psychological migration patterns. Eukaryoto, Animalia, Chordata, Vertebrata, Mammalisa, Theria, primates, Anthropodi, Hominidae, Homo, with only our words, this, now. A Neolithic revolution. Feed and shit and travel and remain still. Metaphysical regents of mental kingdoms. One day we shall love as one, but it is not today, and this, now, shall be eternal. The second piece I'm going to read is a little lighter and slightly amusing. Tim wrote a couple of these. These were his never, ever, ever lists. So they look a bit more like poems because they're actually bullet point lists. They're not written as prose. And this is the second one, so it's called Never, Ever, Ever List Extended. Now, when you're reading it from the page, you've got never, ever, ever at the top, but I'm going to put in some extra never, ever, evers, just otherwise they sound like instructions. So, never, ever, ever trust an old woman with money. Drink with mountain goats. Travel with a gnome on purpose. Put a hat on a bed. Talk about the sweet taste of pain. Try to catch a wild human. Never, ever, ever try to feel your way across the sea in the dark. Press charges against someone whose physical mass is less than your own. Never, ever, ever agree to dance with someone born south of the equator. Agree to take part in any kind of mortal combat, duel, that might involve anything that could potentially lead to any kind of lethargy for either party. Never, ever, ever feed the voices. Help a needy child, sleep peacefully, eat swine, eat AIDS, artificially inseminate any member of your extended family with your own sperm. Never, ever, ever lose a bet to a live peasant. Wake a pregnant woman. Open an umbrella indoors. Look at the backside of a mirror. Have your photo taken within the United Emirates. Never, ever, ever fall in love with a gypsy. Unless you are yourself a gypsy. Never, ever, ever take it 2 levels up in one go. You can take it to the next level or go up 3, never 2. Never, ever, ever hate. Successfully mimic a fully grown mime. Die a noble death. Steal an Irishman's lucky charms.
like to thank Zeb for finding this slot for us in this very busy week for him, and in the process of this terrific festival, which we have enjoyed all. Tim, as Alice said, was Zeb's cousin, and they knew each other fairly well. Tim, in spite of being born in South London, was very conscious of his Irish roots and regarded himself as Irish, and looked a lot like other members of the family who are here today. He would have loved to have been here this week. He was a great film buff. He had a great knowledge of film. He had a whole hard drive, I think, of thousands of films, and he could answer any question about film that you'd want to ask. We always thought that he would. He did some film courses at universities, that he would enter the film industry, and you can hear it from his reading. But he was from Alice's readings. But in other things, he was very good at writing dialogue, and he had submitted a couple of screenplays. BBC is one of them, and so on. And we think, and his friends also think, that had he persisted at this time, we might well find that Tim had been nominated for Best Original Screenplay. Unfulfilled promise of suicide, I'm afraid, is one of the saddest of the consequences of a life truncated in this way. So thanks to Zeb again, and to Limerick. It's been a marvellous week here for us, and we'd like to thank him again for accommodating us. So I'll finish with one other reading from Tim's work. Make notes to know thyself, thine feet, note the footnotes in the crags you stumble across. While my head is spinning, revolving through pretentious pages, under hills and over valleys, you have still forgotten and remain, still as the rock spins. Timoquon, Mercusiet, any of the names you give, what happened in between the leaves and the mountain passes? Where is the begotten love that shaped you? Where is that overpowering lust for redemption? Where is the life, and why is it not here? Remember your own face. Embrace this body. Turn it upside down now. Hers, where it's still present. There it is lurking in caves. This book is sacred, but the abstract is separated from the personal, and that schism gnaws away at its own edges, creating more and more rifts, destroying what little we have accomplished. The aesthetics of the words have overpowered me. Attempted honesty is the virtue I cling to. Pretentious is preferable, as I doubt my integrity, but never again will I doubt my sanity.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Now the band will have their last number, and then we go into the movie. Thank you.
Okay, well, yeah, this is a song that we've written, and I just wanted to say thanks very much for having us along, Tom and Dominic, and listening to the poetry and everything. It's just been really entertaining and moving, so yeah, well done. This one's called So Many Heroes. Alright. Alrighty. We go marching two by two. heroes never make it through. 1 times 1 is how we fought. 1 times your tongue tasted something more than what you bought. You see, love's currency has left the room, the bust, the boom. You're bittersweet. I can't complete this unfinished equation, but your spell still lingers in the air. I love you because I can't. 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 Da 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 da. Single file, please, as you go. Rack them up and send them at the door. Every weekend, someone new. Close my eyes and wish that I was waking up with you. I know it's fantasy, it's fuckery. My mind isn't my own right now. A woman down, and she's counting the days when this feeling will no longer be there. I love you because I can't. 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 Can't say when you're losing me, when you're losing you, when you're losing me. Da 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 da. Thank you.